Hello, my name is Tolga and I exist, therefore I think too much. I am reading Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich. I'm reading Beyond Good and Evil by Fred. I rant while I read, so I'm not getting through this really quickly. Therein I get like 2 points and then I'm done, taxed out. And I am at point 22. Also, while I rant, I have a tendency to cuss, and I am not beholden unto anyone. If you don't like cussing, you can go away. It's your prerogative. Go have fun elsewhere. So, left off on me essentially disliking point 21 because he arguing. That's not what he did, but essentially he played the field so that, you wouldn't be able to argue him because he said both oppositions in a confusing way. So you'd have to agree with him on one or the other, at which point you can't say he's wrong because he said everything. Okay, so point 22 starts, let me be pardoned, no. As an old philologist who cannot desist from the mischief of putting his finger on bad modes of interpretation. Is that what you did? But nature's conformity to law, of which you physicists talk so proudly, as though why it exists only owing to your interpretation and bad philology. It is no matter of fact, no text, but rather just a naively humanitarian adjustment and perversion of meaning. Interesting. With which you make abundant concessions to the democratic instincts of the modern soul. I mean, wasn't he from like 1840, something like that, 1890? Science wasn't, as developed as 2026. And having said that, 2026 has taken a step back. Thanks, Trump. So, the field of science is constantly evolving. Just because it landed on what it understands to be a definition of reality does not mean that, tomorrow that definition will continue to stand, because it is an ever-evolving study. It isn't a objective truth nor a definitive answer. It is a study. Just like, philosophers can be wrong. Philology. Boop, boop, boop. And therein, why would you not concede to the democratic instincts of the modern soul? That just sounds like you're being a prick again. Like, you want everybody to agree with everything all the time and be yes men? Because I'm sure if they were, you'd have something piss poor to say about that as well. Everywhere, equality before the law. Ooh, actually, fun fact on that rant. Do you know how every state has like multiple things representative of the state? So like a state bird, state flower, state flag. The states also have a seal. Or is it cities? I don't know. But either the Nebraska seal or the Omaha seal says exactly that. Equality before the law. So it is wild that we've had any ice raids here at all, but we have. Nature is not different in that respect, nor better than we. If we are nature, what the fuck are you on about? A fine instance of secret motive in which the vulgar antagonism to everything privileged and autocratic, likewise a second and more refined atheism, more refined. Wow, what an egotistical classist bitch, is once more disguised. Okay, maybe I'm I didn't know him to be classist, so maybe I'm wrong. Nature is not different in that respect, nor better than we. A fine instance of secret motive in which the vulgar antagonism to everything privileged and autocratic is once more disguised. Vulgar implies that he does not like people being antagonistic towards that which is privileged and autocratic, and it is therein disguised through nature. Weird. Okay, this is in another language. I assume Latin, because that was the last one he used. Ni Dieu, ni matre. That also is what you want. If I knew what that meant. And therefore, cheers for natural law. No. Because nature, someone said this in my comment. What is natural is above good and evil, because it... who can judge nature, something like that. I don't know if I had initially made this argument in regards to this book. I think I did. Or maybe I just did it in a rant. I don't know. But what I understand to be good, or to be able to be perceived as good, is what is objectively necessary. And what is evil is objectively what is unnecessary. And the differing levels of what is slightly evil versus incredibly evil, or slightly good versus incredibly good, is what is slightly unnecessary versus incredibly unnecessary, or slightly necessary and incredibly necessary. And therein, I do think that with intelligence you can judge nature. I don't think that every level of nature has the ability to judge itself or other aspects of nature. But, I don't think that every single force of nature is necessary. Is it silverback gorillas that kill the mate of a gorilla that they intend to get with, and then kill the children from the prior mating? I think eat them so that they can have, go back into wanting to have more children, wanting to procreate, and then they'll have the children of the one that killed their prior family. I don't think that's good, just because it's, an animal that doesn't have my level of intelligence doesn't mean that it makes it all right. However, I do have to acknowledge that it does not have my same level of intelligence, and it is an entirely different environment, and my morality is based on, the society I hold, which will be incredibly different from the laws of the jungle and needing to procreate to sustain an entire tribe. I have access to technology that these gorillas do not. So that puts me at a different place of understanding for exactly that morality. And therein, to get to objective truth is to define objectivity per the subjectivity of the situation, which in and of itself, I don't think every single human is capable of, let alone every single aspect of nature. So the subjectivity being laws of the jungle, different levels of technology, different pheromones, different chemicals in these gorillas versus myself or someone else. That also needs to be taken into consideration. So, I don't think that humans are always capable of being objective or purely objective, and as objective as the situation would need an individual to be able to judge it appropriately. However, that does not mean that humans are always without that capacity, or that humans shouldn't aim to have that capacity to be as objective in any subjective situation. I believe that objectivity is perfection. And I do believe that humans should aim for perfection and allow themselves grace in not actually getting it. I don't think that it's possible to be perfect, but I don't think that should stop anyone from trying to be. And again, I'm not saying perfect is like you need to have clean girl aesthetic. I'm saying perfect is being objective per the situation. So, yeah. There's that rant. I'm overstimulated now. I have no idea why the fuck I just started ranting. Sorry. Oh, cheers for natural law. Yeah, he seems incredibly embittered, which, I mean, at this point, 22 points into chapter 1 being prejudices of philosophers, and the majority of these points just being Nietzsche's prejudices himself. How would I not define him as embittered at this point? I've said at this point too many times. Is there another way to say that? Literary genius I am not. But as has been said, that is interpretation, not text. And somebody might come along who, with opposite intentions and modes of interpretation, could read out of the same nature, and with regard to the same phenomena, just the tyrannical, inconsiderate, and relentless enforcement of the claims of power. Did you not like people antagonizing the privileged and the autocratic? But now you are criticizing power? What? Huh. Does he hate himself? Because he's doing the things he doesn't like. An interpreter who should so place the unexpectationalness. Also, he has a tendency to make up words, and in 1840, maybe these are words, because English has a tendency to continue changing and evolving. But what the fuck is this shit? Unexceptionalness. At least it's not what modern day does. I have another pet peeve among my many, which is adding letters to a word to make it not a word anymore. But then in doing so, you lengthen the word where the appropriate word to use there would be less long. Like uncomfortableness, discomfort. You know? It's infuriating. And unconditionalness of all will to power before your eyes. I'm sure jumping back into that didn't make sense to you. It surely didn't make any sense to me. Though, like I said, maybe in this video, maybe in the last, my ADHD is inflamed. Okay, so this is all relevant to an interpreter who will help you understand life. Now he's ranting, just like I rant. I think, he's been overcome by emotions at this point. Do. Before your eyes, that almost every word and the word tyranny itself would eventually seem unsuitable, or like a weakening and softening metaphor, as being too human. Tyranny is too human? I guess. And who should, nevertheless, and by asserting the same about this world as you do, namely, that it has a necessary and calculable course. I don't assert that. I think everybody, even if, okay, wow. So the argument has been pertaining to free will or the lack thereof, and the reason I didn't like point 21 was because it said what I said, but in a negative overtone, that both exist simultaneously. But his was that neither exists simultaneously. Which I think his is far less likely, because if neither exists, then what does exist? So yeah, this is the assertion that the world has a necessary and calculable course isn't even pertaining to prior points he's made, which is all in consideration of free will of the individual. It has fuck all to do with the world. Fuck's sake. You know, if fuck me, I just got overwhelmed. If the individual has free will, that does not necessarily, put the world into the same stranglehold. Oh, lack of free will. I meant there. Whoops. Maybe we're the order in the chaos of the world. And that's our lack of free will in the free will of the world. Who knows? We don't. So yeah, I don't believe what he just said I believe in. I think he's fed up with the generality of what he hears. Not, however, because laws obtain in it, but because they are absolutely lacking. Laws are lacking. And every power affects its ultimate consequences every moment. So he had prior brought up philosophy and philology and science, and now he's bringing up laws, so I can only presume that these laws are pertaining to the laws of science and the laws of physics. And then he says that these laws are lacking. 1840, 1850, 1890, again, very well could be that they were lacking at that time. I think we've done, a good amount of work to make up for that in 2026. So if in 2026 you're reading Nietzsche here and going, yeah, fuck yeah, I think you need a swift kick in the ass, because you're agreeing with someone about, God, math is not my strong suit. You're fucking centuries older than you. Get help. Just because these people are sworn by throughout history does not mean that they cannot be argued against. Just because someone is incredibly intelligent, and no one is denying Nietzsche is an intelligent man, or was, however you want to regard that, just because someone is intelligent does not make them a perfect source of information or wit. It doesn't mean that you don't have the ability, permission, or capacity to argue them. And I don't like that we have upheld most literature, most works of philosophy as solid and objective, when again, humanity is but a subjective existence. So the laws are lacking, and every power affects its ultimate consequences every moment. But he had prior argued against cause and effect in totality, saying it doesn't even exist. I think he lives in a vacuum. Like, literally. Very literally. He is a vacuum. Okay. It's ultimate, granted that this also is only interpretation, and you will be eager enough to make this objection, well, so much the better. I mean, if you argue him, it keeps him in work. So, there's that, Point 22 was slightly less infuriating, but it wasn't, the best. Although, maybe I made it worse, because I couldn't read even a bit of it straight without interjecting myself. Sorry. So 23, and this is actually the last point of chapter 1, and then we'll be done with chapter 1. Huzzah! So point 23, all psychology hitherto has run aground on moral prejudices and timidities. It has not dared to launch out into the depths. Again, this is in regard to 1850, 1890. This is not 2026. And I'd have to look into it again. I don't know when it was, but I do know that prior machinations of psychology had it that, different sections of the brain, and different sections of the brain do correspond with different things of the emotions, I guess. Initially it was like the back part of the brain corresponded to love. So it wasn't even a chemical process of the neurons firing in your brain. It was the whole section. If you took this chunk out of the brain, you'll deny yourself love. So prior psychology gave way to what we understand now. It provided the groundwork, but it was definitely something that needed to be mended and worked on. It wasn't correct. However, it had the capacity to become correct. So it was I guess it was a necessary evil. Because it was unnecessary, but it was necessary in order to get to what was actual, eventually. Boop, boop, boo. Insofar as it is allowable... Oh, actually, I wonder if philosophy, especially for the time in which people could be paid for being a philosopher, had a bit of a fight with psychology when psychology was starting up, of like which science was going to be the one that was going to be ultimately paid into more by society and by professors in colleges and whatnot. And I guess psychology won out. However, I do think philosophy has ground, because it is like spirituality without religion or gods. It is the ability to utilize imagination to map a world, and then science fills in that map, builds on it with actualization. But it provides a roadmap for science to work into after, come through and clarify and define if it actually exists that way, or if it was just a pondering. And I think that's needed. I think imagination is needed for that reason. So, if you do not give credence to spirituality, that would be called imagination as well. But spirituality and philosophy, I think, are perfectly needed in society so that sciences can come through and build up on what has already been perceived and make it understandable, or what is the word I'm not going to be able to remember right now, or refute it. But you would not be able to build up on anything if you did not initially imagine it in the first place. So rather than struggling, should philosophy or psychology exist, they should both exist. People should use their imagination where they have the ability to do so. Actually, they're not even comparable. That's apples and oranges, because, again, psychology would be the science, philosophy would be the imagination, just like spirituality would be the imagination for physics. Insofar as it is allowable to recognize in that which has hitherto been written evidence of that which has hitherto been kept silent, it seems as if nobody had yet harbored the notion of psychology as the morphology and development, doctrine of the will to power, as I conceive of it. Psychology as the doctrine of the will to power. Oh, so he's a mind over matter kind of person? I respect that. The power of moral prejudices has penetrated deeply into the most intellectual world, the world apparently most indifferent and unprejudiced, and has obviously operated in an injurious, obstructive, blinding, and distorting manner. Well, I would assume so, because morality is subjective for the society, so if you're taking into consideration all morality, you would stunt the growth of anything, ever. Because if you have to adhere perfectly to every single facet of subjectivity from any angle it's coming at you, You're never going to be anything in and of your own person. You're never going to make anything of whatever it is you're trying to hold to subjectivity. Although he uses a hell of a lot of words to say that. Though I don't know that I'm, not using a hell of a lot of words myself. A proper physiopsychology has to contend with unconscious antagonism in the heart of the investigator. It has the heart against it. Well, I guess this is old dogs don't learn new tricks, can't learn new tricks. If you introduce to someone new information, how much are they going to argue against it because they've been made uncomfortable by you, defining their ego is not worth it. Defining years of their life, accumulated data that they thought they earned as worthless. Telling someone that they have to start over again. It's got to be painful. Most people don't deal with that pain. They feed into their more animalistic ideation and choose violence. And that's argument. Violence is more than physical. Hard against it. Even a doctrine of the reciprocal conditionalness. Condition. Yeah, reciprocal condition. You didn't even need the oldness of it. Too long. Of the good and the bad impulses causes as refined immorality, distress, and aversion in a still strong and manly conscience. Why does it have to be manly? Sorry. Why can't it be a male woman? Okay, I sound like I'm mocking, but honestly, a rose by any name would still have thorns. That's what I adhere to. So I try very heavily to, adhere to, if someone wants to be called something, I have a shit memory. I do my damnedest to respect other people and what they want in their own life. Personally, if someone calls me sir, I am not offended because it is not a part of my life's journey that has caused me mental turmoil or anguish. And so when I use a mocking tone about woman and man and all of that, it is not to make light of what is currently going on in the political, emotional atmosphere of LGBTQAI plus identifiers. I respect individuals. I respect the rights of individuals. And I aim to do better by those individuals that introduce their desires in my life, especially if those desires, are not ethically compromising. Why the fuck wouldn't I respect the fuck out of that? So, I guess some people define it as morally compromising, but I mean, if it's someone else, their life, it's their life to live. And then where free will is concerned, God designed them an entity unto themselves. You can't control anyone but yourself. The very least you can do is respect and love thy neighbor, However the fuck they define themselves is their journey in life. I see nothing wrong with helping them in their journey in life by aiding in their understanding of themselves. Especially, again, when that understanding of themselves is not stepping on any toes at all. In reality, in objective truth. Naming something doesn't step on a damn toe. All of this to say, I made a joke, and then I realized the joke sounds bad. Sorry. Still more so, a doctrine of the divination of all good impulses from bad ones. I am so lost. I'm just gonna move on. If, however, a person should regard even the emotions of hatred, envy, covetousness, and imperiousness as life-conditioning emotions, are the fuck they? Are they? I guess at that point you could argue that any emotion is a life-conditioning emotion. Couldn't you? Because that's just something that's going to influence you anyways. Just as everything influences you. Butterfly effect. as factors which must be present fundamentally and essentially in the general economy of life. Economy of life. Give and take of life. Interesting. There's so much going on in this man's life, which must therefore be further developed if life is to be further developed. The emotions must be further developed? Imperiousness must be further developed? How do you further develop feeling imperious? Huh. If development is growth, and these emotions affect you, or condition your life, then it may be that the conditioning of one's life and the need to develop these emotions would be that you grow from being imperious to, the opposite of conceding, to granting grace, to allowing a generalized respect for individuals. If life is to be further developed, which I guess everybody makes these New Year's resolutions because they feel stunted, I presume, in one way or another. So it may be common. That's what I was getting at. It may be common that people feel stunted in their life and want to grow. Then you would have to understand that everything you stand by needs to be assessed if it is serving you in what you want to become, or if you need to grow from that and become something else. Have it become something else to condition you into not being stunted. Why? I think I'm just defining what he's saying. Yeah. He will suffer from such a view of things as from seasickness. Oh. I guess if he's stunted. Whoa, no, he's saying assessing these as life conditioning emotions is nauseating. I assume then that Nietzsche doesn't deal well with emotions and would rather just not have them, which I can appreciate. Do I share too much information? I don't fucking know, but undiagnosed on a retired assessment thing. I forget what it's called. I hit all of the points of major manic depressive disorder, which is now known as bipolar. My mother, being a therapist, has long decided that I am bipolar, which feels emotions too strongly. And, the undiagnosed part is I would have to go in for the diagnosis, but in everything else, I can recognize that I do feel emotions really strongly. And there have definitely been times that I have, wished to not. So I can appreciate this sentiment. But even in appreciating it, I have also recognized in my person I would much rather prefer to feel strongly than not at all. If sometimes I could turn it off, that'd be cool. But if I can't turn it off and the option is either kill it entirely or have it, I'd rather have it. Emotions. I think that's part of the gift of being human, is getting to experience emotions. That's a pretty cool thing. Although, cooler if you can figure out and understand those emotions as being factors of life that ought not control you but alert you to what is happening. Okay, and yet this hypothesis is far from being the strangest and most painful in this immense and almost new domain of dangerous knowledge. He's calling psychology dangerous knowledge. Interesting. I am so dead set on, absolutely 110% swear that Nietzsche would thoroughly fucking hate modern day US. And there are, in fact, 100 good reasons why everyone should keep away from it who can do so. Psychology. On the other hand, if one has once drifted hither with one's bark, well, with one's bark? Canoe? Is that like a fun colloquial term for like a canoe? Very good. Now let us set our teeth firmly. Oh, no. I don't want you to cause me pain. Let us open our eyes and keep our hand fast on the helm. Okay, so we're floating on bark. And gritting our teeth for some reason. We sail away right over morality if we pay attention to our emotions and psychology. Huh. Jesus. I mean, maybe, in some cases, again, if you honor emotions more than you honor reality, and I'm not saying emotions aren't real, but like I reference, myself feeling too strongly, I have to acknowledge that sometimes reality, even if it does call for the emotion of sadness, my sadness may be exerting energy I don't have the privilege of exerting in that moment. So, giving too much power to emotions can also be dangerous for the time, place, and I wanted to say thing, like we're naming nouns, but the time and place. And therein it can, especially in morality being subjective to society, it can absolutely go against generalized morality if you play into your emotions and honor your emotions more than you honor your surroundings, people around you, the situation at hand, if the emotions are even relevant to the situation or even relevant to yourself. Speaking on psychology, you can have fucked up chemicals. Lord howdy do I know that. And so even if you do feel emotions, these emotions may not be correct emotions per the situation. So, you may find someone laughing at a funeral because they don't have the proper means to handle whichever chemicals are coming in, like whether it be fight or flight, and they're dealing with an influx of adrenaline because of fear of death. So just because you have emotions doesn't mean you should honor the emotions as the objective truth. They are a subjective reality. Okay, so we are now crushing morality. We destroy perhaps the remains of our own morality, by daring to make our voyage thither into psychology. But what do we matter? Oh, honey. Someone hug Nietzsche. Never yet did a profounder world of insight reveal itself to daring travelers and adventurers and the psychologist who thus makes a sacrifice. Fuck. It is not the sacrificio del intellido. On the contrary, so it is not the sacrifice of intellect. Why can't you just say that in English? You've said everything else in English. On the contrary, will at least be entitled to demand in return that psychology shall once more be recognized as the queen of the sciences, for whose service and equipment the other sciences exist. For psychology is once more the path to the fundamental problems. People's psychology have created fundamental problems. Cough, cough, Epstein. But I don't think, and hopefully that's not the case, I think psychology is a needed science. I think it's an ever-evolving science, and that's why it's argued that it is a pseudoscience. But I don't think that, physics is being used to prop up psychology. In fact, how do neurons fire? I would like to know the physics of that. Has anybody looked into it? Because they should. I want them to. Do it. Maybe I'm just not smart. Maybe I just don't know how electricity works. I should look into that myself. Sorry. So yeah, I think Nietzsche is a bitter old man, needs a hug, good cup of cocoa, and was probably looking at, in fear of the end of his money. They were dealing with whether philosophers were going to get paid in the future versus psychologists, especially an emerging science into the field. And during the time, that would have been new technology, fun for everybody to talk about. It would have been all the rage and all the hype in fashion. So philosophers were probably during 1840, 1850 struggling with, how are we going to get our bread and butter? Interesting. Don't know my takeaway. Don't know yours. Have fun. Eat well. Drink well. Drink responsibly. Don't drink and drive. Drink and walk. No, don't do that. Sorry. Stay in a corner by yourself. Always. Sorry, don't do that either. Have community. Okay, good night. Bye.